Hi, how's it going? This is Riz at Enough Colin for YouTube. I'm here to continue my read-along reviews for To Benight and Beguile, written by John Philip Betancourt, Book 2, Chapter 5. And yes, I'm gonna just do that for myself and Dexter. Okay, here we go. Philip Braga's life seemed to be snowballing day after day since the moment Eliza Good held him captive at her cottage and tapped his body for fresh blood for almost a week. He knew the dangers of letting Sebastian do as he pleasure, but at the same time he felt almost bound to protect him, guard him, and, in truth, steer anyone getting close to the truth further away from it. As Philippe walked to meet Christian at his office from the cafe where he ran into his beautiful partner Celeste and Charlotte, he thought there about he thought about tactics he needed to make sure Christian stayed away from Good Island, and the two witches who made Sebastian what he was, and what they made Philip what he was becoming, an enabler of evil. Inside his sorry, I almost said coffin. Inside his office. Don't mind me. Constable Christian Evans, nervously scribbled on notes. He was panicked and unsure of himself, actually totally off his uneasiness of what was out of character for a man in charge of Welshport Island's civic duties. And he wasn't alone. Evie's brother Nicholas Jordan had arrived a long journey over the Atlantic from England to find his sister, who he had not held contact since her wedding day. Nicholas was promised by Christian to help release her from Wyncliffe, but Christian had yet to bring anything up from the local courts like he promised. Nicholas could see the strain on the constable's face, and in his mannerisms he felt disturbed, and just as easy as Christian's actions were showing he was. Do you need something to calm you, constable? I could get someone. Anyone. The hotel said if I ever needed a doctor on my stay, they could call a doctor by the name of Ward. Should I try Dr. Ward? Nicholas asked as he sat in the chair across from the frazzled Christian. No, no, I'm fine. I'm just running my brain about how to help Evie. She's all I think about sometimes. I'm fine and I can focus on work and focus on things I need to do for this community, but then I have these bouts of impatient yearning where can't grasp one to onto one single thought, and I don't know. It's like I've been put under some sort of strange spell, Christian said. He was finally on the right track. The day Christian went to Good Island to find Mary, Eliza has blown a powder in his face that was meant to erase his memory or negative thoughts of Mary's whereabouts. The powder was to push his eagerness to arrest Mary for murder into a sort of surrender. It worked, but an unfortunate side effect was a lingering, anxious tone of life. Christian lost his ability to make choices and clear his mind. His brain, thanks to Eliza's powder, was a mismatch of confusion and stress and anxiety to the point where he could not function. It's just sometimes you're fine and sometimes you're not. I'm rather worried, Nicholas replied, noting Christian's inconsistency. What? What's that? Christian again replied, further worrying Nick that putting his trust in the consul may have been a bad idea. At the door, listening carefully, was Philip earlier for his meeting. I said you, Nick, begin before being interrupted. It's the Lord family. They've done something to me. Ever since I saw that body, the night they took Evie, I've never been the same. I can't sleep some nights and others. I sleep too much. I don't eat some days, and others I eat too much. Nick, I can't focus on a single thought. I just can't focus, Christian expressed. What should we do? I could call that Dr. Warden, Nick replied, his face plagued with worry. They'll think I'm crazy. I'll lose everything, Christian replied. If I could figure this out for you, I would, but I can't. You said you'd help me, and at this point, you're the only person I trust. You're no good to me or Evie if you can't help yourself. Please let me help you get yourself together, Nicholas replied. Listen to me, Chris, Philippe said, entering it. Or listen to him, Chris, Philippe said, entering the office. I think he's right. Philip Christian said, his eyes almost watering from seeing his friend again. Another sign of his strain showing. Nicholas, Evie's lawyer, Nick said, still introducing himself as Evie's fake lawyer, his paranoia on who to trust still on high alert. Evie has a lawyer? Why does she need a lawyer? Chris, what is this? Philippe replied, annoyed. Nicholas has Christian begun to say, stammering for a lie to continue. Nicholas's identity is secret because she's being held against her will at Wincliffe Sanitarium by the Lord family's power and money. I want to help her out of there. There's absolutely no proof she's mentally ill. It needs to be there, Nick, really forcefully. And what proof do you have that she's not? From what I heard, she was seeing her dead husband all over their house. That doesn't sound very stable to me, Philippe said, playing devil's advocate. She's my. Nick began to say she was his sister. He knew her better than anyone else, but stopped before outing himself. She's my client. And I know her as best as anyone could, and she's never provided for me of inkling of her being mad, he finished. She's not. I know she's not, Christian replied. Chris, my friend, you're exhausted. You look like you haven't slept in days. You need to go home and rest. Take some time off and let the deputies take care of things until you're back and better than ever, Philippe and said, going to get Christian out of the way for a bit. No, I can't. No, he can't do that. I don't have anyone else, and I can't get out of here without the constable approving that she doesn't really need to be there, Nick confessed. Philippe wasn't sure he liked Nicholas' pushing of Christian, who seemed to be falling deeper and deeper into his building nervous breakdown. It was all he could do not to push the young Jordan man into the hallway, forced him to leave, but Christian mattered first. He is clearly not well. I don't know how you found out about Evie and her predicament, but I think you should count your blessings and call it a day, sir. Lords aren't a perfect family. They have their issues, but the one thing that is true is that they love each other and look out for each other, Philippe said, even surprising himself for defending the Lords, but it was all he could do to make sure he kept everyone off Sebastian's scent. And so far it seemed that no one seemed to be. By putting her in a mental institution, Nicholas countered. She's not sick. She's not sick, Christian shouted, perhaps confessing his own mental rawness in doing so. Fine, fine. Do what you want. But if you ask me to come here to help you get Evie out of that place, I won't do it. I won't try to stop you, but I can't help you go along with these lines, Philippe said, relieved. The two men were sure they wanted to put their forces on Evie and off of Mary and Eliza, which was Philippe's true motive. We need to save her, Christian said, pausing. She's what? Nicholas asked. What do you need to save her from? Philippe said, adding the second question. The monster, Christian replied in a whisper, repeating the words gasps were said in his last blood, gurgling breath. Monster? What is he talking about? Nicholas asked Philip. The monster, Christian repeated, then standing up and going to his office window. His eyes glazed over, and he only stared out beyond the office window glass. The powerful dust Eliza blew in Christian's face, truly doing its deed of putting Christian in a massive confusion and mental mess. He's not well, not well at all, Philip said softly, realizing perhaps Christian had seen Sebastian somewhere in town lurking in the shadows. It worried him instantly. He's so strange. When he went to Wincliffe yesterday, he was somewhat fine. He did mention this person called Gaspar and a death. I don't I don't know. I don't know what this is, Nicholas told Philippe, feeling desperate for some clarity. Philippe felt disgusted with himself because of the satisfaction that Christians seemed to be out of sorts. It means no one would believe a word he would said, but the fact is still, had Gaspar's monster on his mind, meant he needed to push things further to keep Sebastian's new life as the undead a secret. This had to be to keep everyone safe. Maybe there is one way we can help him, Philippe said to Nicholas. I love her. I'm in love with her. I love her. I'm in love with her, Christian muttered, looking out the window. He's talking about Evie, isn't he? He really does love her. How can we help them both? Nick asked Philippe, who was ever so eager to get Christian out of the way for his own good. If he wants to be with Evie this bad, and he himself is clearly out of sorts, we could call the doctor, Philippe offered. I love her, Christian repeated. No, I offered to do the same, but he didn't want me to call Dr. Ward, Nicholas replied. Not Ward, Kim, Dr. Kim of Wincliffe. We have Christian, we can have Christian committed there. Then you and I could perhaps figure out what to do next, but Christian can't help you like this. Not like this, Philippe said, trying to get the constable out of the way, and thus out of Sebastian's way. Feelings of guilt started to fill Philippe's heart of helping Sebastian before helping Christian, but it was the best and almost safest way to keep everyone alive. Nicholas shook his head, unsure of how to answer. He didn't know how to free Evie, much less have Christian take there too. But from his actions, Christian was surely in need of psychiatric help. As Nick and Philippe contemplated Christian's fate, he tapped his fingers nervously, only the windows over and over, whispering to himself the words monster and save her. It was clear Nick took a deep breath and saw no other choice. Whatever. Do what you have to, but I'm still going to try to remove my client from the hospital. She doesn't deserve to be there, Nicholas said, almost revealing his connection to Evie. And as Philippe helped the dazed Christian away from the window, Nicholas realized he could go and help take Christian and perhaps slip away from admissions and find and free his sister. I'll call Kim, Philip said. I'll help you, Nicholas replied eagerly. On Good Island, the wind rushed intensely over the thicket of trees that surrounded the small, singular cottage in the center of the island. It was nearly dusk, and the lights coming from the cottage windows reflected on the surrounding trees like the coming sunset on the horizon. Inside, Eliza and Mary could carefully prepare their experiment bodily transference with the unconscious Georgina Kent. Georgina was on the ground in front of Earth on top of the soft, moist stuff mattress. The area surrounded her. Various chairs, a large table, and shelves had all been pushed back up against the back wall so that they two sorcerers had enough room on the floor to cast their spell. It was a big job, according to Eliza, who had never done this before. As mother and daughter gathered the integral parts of their spell, Georgina started to come to. Her eyes flickered open. She looked up at the cottage's ceiling and didn't recognize it. Her neck was hurting, a side effect from the long travel of Sebastian, who was in his slumber room awaiting the coming night. She moaned and stretched and sat up, but said nothing. Eliza, busily setting up for the switch, didn't notice. Mary did. Mother, Mary said, pulling her mother's arm so that her body turned to see the awakened Georgina. What? Where am I? Georgina asked, not recognizing Mary at first. But then, as her eyes adjusted, gasped at her. What do you want from me? She added, jumping up to her feet from the mattress they had laid her on. Eliza smiled and clutched Mary's shaking hand that was firmly on her upper arm. There is no reason to fear us. In fact, we want to help you. That's why we've brought you here, Eliza said, stepping one step closer to Georgina, who stepped back one step, feeling the heat from the fireplace on her back. How did I get here? I saw the other night. I saw he attacked me. How did I see him? How did I get here, Mary? Good. How did you do this? Georgina replied. Everything from the last few days started to flood her mind all at once. It almost became too much. She felt faint. She felt flushed. She grabbed her head. It was about to fall backwards when Eliza quickly leapt forward and held Georgina up. There, come sit down. You've been through a very traumatic situation. I can understand how this must seem. It's all too much. Even I feel like that. So I imagine you are overwhelmed, my dear. Mary, fetch her some tea. Eliza said. Mary quickly complied. What do you want from me? Georgina asked, grabbing hold of the hot mug of tea and starting into the warm liquid before sipping as if it to check for poison. Don't worry. Don't worry, we don't want to hurt you. We need your help, and what we can offer you will no doubt set you free, Mary said in a whisper. How can you help me? The whole village is terrified of you. They all know what you did. We all know what you did, Georgina said, sipping the tea for her nerves. We understand completely how it must seem, but my daughter, Mary, was in a way just like you, used by the Lord family for their own gains. And that is why we need your help. We need you to help us, and in doing so, you'll be free of them, Eliza replied. I'll lose everything if the family realized I helped you with anything that hurt them. How can you even ask me that? Georgina asked. They'll never know, Eliza added. You want me to help you without them finding out? That doesn't make sense. Mr. Lord finds everything out. He has his way. I cannot be the one to cross him. Georgina answered. We have a way, but you must trust us, Mary replied as Georgina turned from Eliza when Mary spoke and saw something very familiar in her eyes. The blue color, it was indelible. She had always known those blue eyes, but had never put two and two together. They were also Charlotte's eyes. Charlotte, this is all about Miss Charlotte, isn't it? Are you her mother, Georgia asked as both Mary and Eliza shot each other a look. Yes, Mary answered quickly, but it's not just about her. It's about the whole family. What about they've done over the years? that have left so many destroyed lives in their wake. I'm sure even in your own life you can relate to something like that. How did you come to being Rebecca's personal maid? Georgina looked down again at her mug of tea. Her own connection to the family was a history she wished she had forgotten, but she never did. How could she? It made her who she was, a trapped maid within the walls of a place that terrified her day in and day out. She was trapped there. She owed the family. Her whole family was in debt to the lords. But being that she was the last one living, that debt needed to be paid by her and her alone. My mother was a mistress to Albert Lord, Mrs. Lord's husband. I always knew him as Uncle Albert, but in fact he was my mother's benefactor. Father, when he found this out, jumped off the top of the lighthouse. My mother was broken-hearted. She felt so horrible that she had broken her marriage and pushed my father to his demise, and also ruined the Lord's marriage. She later jumped from the lighthouse too. Eventually I became a ward of the state, and when I turned 17, Miss Lord took me in as her maid, away from my family to pay her back for what she called personal pains and suffering. I had nowhere to go, no job, no money, no family, so I went, Georgina explained. They're evil people, Georgina, evil. You had nothing to do with all that infidelity, Eliza replied. No, Mrs. Lord has been good to me. She has. She has treated me like her own daughter, Georgina exclaimed as the fire crackled in the earth. Her own? She makes you work there out of multiplied, manipulated guilt. You had nothing to do with her husband being with your mother. You were a child. She's wicked, just like her son who keeps me from my child, and I want to make it right, all of it, with your help, Mary answered. How? How in the world could you both get what you want with my help and still keep me safe? Eliza and Mary looked at each other. Eliza got up from the stool and walked over to her pushed back bookshelf and pulled out a large thick book. It was a book of spells. The pages were old and stained, yellow. They were frayed on the edges like old cloth, slightly torn and withered. This book will heal us all. We can do what we can do. Georgina is give you a new life. With a single spell, a single work of magic, arts, we can provide you with a new life that will save us from the lords and in turn give us what we need, access. All we need is access. You have the key to that lock, Eliza explained. What kind of access? Georgina wondered. I want to be able to enter the mansion and stay there, watch over my child, protect her, be with her. But I can't with this face, this body. But I can with yours. We switch, Georgina. I can be you, you can be me, and we can help you escape Welshport forever and start over somewhere else, somewhere safe where you can never have to be another person's maid ever again, Mary explained. You're mad. You're both mad. You want me to switch bodies. How is that even? You're mad, Georgina replied, jumping from her chair and spilling the tea over her dark skirt. Calm down, Eliza said, grabbing Georgina's wrist. This is real. This is true, and we are not mad. I promise you I can give you freedom. All the freedom you deserve, and that you should have had before the nightmare of the lords entered your life. In Mary's body you can escape this place and start anew, Georgina. I give you my word, your life will be safe and sound if you help us switch. Mary needs this. Her daughter needs this. Think of yourself at Charlotte's age. Your mother was gone. You were alone in the orphanage. Now imagine if Jacob was your father. What do you think Charlotte's future is with a man like that as your guide to life. George, Georgia took a breath and looked down at the book. She looked at the two women in front of her, and their gazes of sincerity and truth. It was a strange request, switching bodies with Mary Good, but the temptation of freedom from her servitude to Rebecca and all the nasty things she experienced there was stronger than she realized. Freedom was a tastier dish. Will it hurt? Georgina asked to Eliza and Mary's delight. Not a pinch, Eliza replied, taking Georgina's head and leading her back to the mattress on the floor. What do I do? Georgina asked. Lie there still. Keep your eyes closed and focus on living outside of this body in the next. Imagine your life as a free woman, because in a moment's time it will be real. Eliza said as she and Mary sat down on the other side of Georgina. Georgina nodded her head, and she was laid out long ways in front of the fire, her feet feeling the most of the heat coming from the fire. Liza sat to her left and Mary to her right. There was a large white circle of salt that surrounded all three women, and leaves of sage sprinkled over the salt. The room was dark, with only the flashing red and yellow flames from the fireplace lighting it, and the smell of the oils from the lamps filled the room, aroma that calmed Georgina's heartbeat to a slow and steady normal. Eliza and Mary both seated with their legs tucked under them and their hands touching their palms closed the eyes and prayed. Eliza opened her eyes to get one more look at her. Mary, who kept hers closed and was mothering her prayers. Once Eliza's spell was done, Mary and Georgina would be switched, and Mary would be no more. At least not in the conventional way. It hurt Eliza to know this would be an end of sorts to her daughter. Georgina, inside of Mary, could not live in Welshport. She would have to vanish for her own safety, ending her connection to Eliza and the body she gave birth to. It was like a death by disappearance. My sweet girl, Eliza whispered to herself. Goodbye. Then their prayers continued, and when each prayer was done, Eliza opened the book to the spell of bodily switches and read aloud. Hein Perticus in Tol. Yeah, I can't read that. Okay. I can only speak English. Um, with the spell read aloud, the winds began to blow harder and harder through the trees outside. The branches scratched the windows. The fire and the heat became hotter and harder. God, I can't talk. Hotter and hotter and hotter. God, Georgina winced as the spell began to take over her mind, and soak Mary to begin to feel the pull of the powers. Eliza repeated uh, the same words. Mary moaned as a bright light began to lift from her body. Her hands began to shake. Georgina, too, began to have light come from deep inside her chest. Her eyes opened, still closed, as the wind burst through the shuttered windows and filled the room, rushing over the fire and blowing it out. The entire room, except for the energy glowing from both women, now flowing around their body like a swirling yellow fog. Eliza repeated, the words, then a burst of energy, the glowing yellow lights from Mary and Georgina quickly switched places. In a second burst it blew Mary back to the ground. Then everything was dark. The sun had set. The fire was out. The wind stopped. There was a sound, but then Eliza struck a match and a lit candle. She walked over to the fireplace and lit it again. Mary and Georgina opened their eyes. saw the world from two new bodies. Georgina and Mary stood up and looked at their faces. Mary smiled. Georgina cried. It had worked. I can't believe it, Georgina said in Mary's voice from Mary's body. We did it, Mother. We did it, said in Georgina's voice from Georgina's body. Liza smiled at her work. Georgina looked at her new body, her new hands, her new blonde hair, her new blue eyes. It was strange and yet exhilarating. You're free, Mary said, holding her former hands to Georgina, who smiled. Now we find Evie. A growling voice said from the shadows. It was Sebastian who stepped into the newly lit room to Georgina's shock. She gasped and stepped back behind Mary. It's him, Georgina explained. Liza grabbed Georgina tight to her to comfort her. It's okay, he's a friend. You have what you want, now help me get what I want. This was our deal, he replied. Liza and Mary looked at each other and realized they had helped Georgina escape the debt she did not owe, only to fall into the debt they did owe, and one to Sebastian. The happy feelings of success quickly. Evie was Sebastian's only want, only desire. He needed her like the blood he needed to live, and the two witches who had made his life this way were going to help him get her back, one way or another. As the darkness in the sky intensified over Welshport and the seagulls scratched in the distance lifting of the lifting Atlantic fog, a small car with shining chrome bumpers and a black canvas top rolled through the gates of St. Thomas Cemetery that looked over the north shore cliffside of the island. A car was carrying Rebecca Lord and her driver, Hampstead. Rebecca was on a mission to make sure what she knew was true. The truth, she thought, was that her grandson Sebastian was dead and buried in a sleek velvet-lined coffin in the family plot in the cemetery, and her groundskeeper was going to prove that Sebastian's ring somehow appearing at Georgina's attack was just a coincidence. As Rebecca got out of her car, with Hampstead's hand guiding her down the small steps to the grave-filled front drive, gravel front drive outside the groundskeeper's small location home, he was already outside shivering in the cold. Ma'am, what's the meaning of this visit? When I got your car earlier after dinner, I wasn't expecting you to show up. After the sun went down, the cemetery groundskeeper said, his breath puffing in the white flums from dry lips. I need you to prove to me that this is a fake, or a copy, Rebecca said, revealing Sebastian's ring in her black gloved hand. I don't understand, Miss Lord. I'm not a jeweler, the groundskeeper sniffed. Rebecca's eyes squinted with a distance as a far-off ship wailed its foghorn in the newly thickening fog. Of course you're not, but you can dig, can't you? I want you to, Rebecca paused, exhume my grandson from his grave. If he isn't missing his ring, well, then I'll know this one is a fake, Rebecca replied. Exhume Sebastian, ma'am. You don't want to do that, not now. It's been so long since he died, and it just won't please you to see. I can do it later, when the sun comes up, and I will send word to you at Terramore if what I find. The groundskeeper said nervously, as he knew the grave was completely empty. No, I have to see for myself. I need you to do this now, and whatever is done there won't give any more nightmares of his death than I already have. I can assure you now, we so you So you have shovels, or should I lend you some? Because I have come prepared for any excuse as to not to do this tonight. Rebecca relief, lifting an eyebrow and cutting the groundskeeper at the knees. Ma'am, I have to say, he began speaking, as more puffy white breath came from his mouth into cold air. This is unethical. I could lose my job. You won't. No one will ever know, and if it should get out, I'll protect you. You will not lose your job. I'll make sure of it, Rebecca answered as a shiver rain came up her concert corseted back. Sir, come, it's too cold to argue with you any more. We'll take the car to Sebastian and you'll use our shovels. Hampstead will help. With that order, clean cut and sturdy, the groundskeeper was concerned. He took a deep breath and followed Rebecca into the back of the Model T car. She shoved the shovels to the one side of the back seat and moved herself to the far left, allowing him enough room to sit next to her. He was a tall man of Welsh descent, as many people on the island were, thanks to its first settlers coming from the area of the UK. He was tan-skinned from the many hours in the island sun working on the grounds of St. Taramore Cemetery, with brown eyes and dark hair. His lips, scratchy and chapped, became pink and plump when he licked them. Rebecca noticed his handsome face now in the soft light of the back of the car, and wondered how on earth such a young man could do the work he did. All the while the car drove the crooked slim pathways around the cemetery all the way up the largest green slope up to the Lord family plot. It didn't take long. As soon as they arrived, Hampstead pulled the shovels out of the car, and the groundskeeper went from him over to Sebastian's grave. Rebecca, hiding from the bitter night cold, stayed in the car until the moment they were to open the coffin. She sat there, breath puffing, white from her nostrils, imagining Sebastian's body, hoping it was still as pristine as the time she saw it before. They closed the coffin's lid. How she dreamt he'd come home and hug her, kiss Charlotte, give them all a good laugh, as he so often did. He used to take away all their pain, and it was quite the challenge with all the drama the family had constantly gone through. But he did it. When he was alive, he always did it. It was Rebecca's ray of light. But now, to find this copy signature in, all her darkened crept in again. She watched as her pocket watch ticked away the hour, and the dirt from the grave flew into the air, and then onto the cold hard surface of the graveyard. She saw the dirt fly in the face of the giant angel statue that made up her husband's plot, where his body lay next to the small body of her stillborn daughter Victoria that Rebecca gave birth to after her two sons. And next to Victoria, an empty plot waiting for Rebecca. Every time Rebecca could muster the courage to look out the small cube-shaped window of her car, Hampstead and the groundskeeper were deeper and deeper into the grave, until suddenly their shovels hit the lid. Mom, we've Ma'am, we've hit, Hampstead called from inside the grave. Rebecca sighed deeply. A small part of her was hoping they'd never find it, that all of this would never come to pass, and that she wouldn't have to do what she was about to do. She quickly crossed herself, clutched her rosary right in her hand and Sebastian's signet ring in the other, and slowly made a short walk over to the open mouth of Sebastian's grave. The groundskeeper was shaking at the bottom. He knew it was empty. He found it empty with the town's priest who was with him in the morning after Mary had taken the newly brought to life Sebastian. Ma'am, when I open this, please look away. Let me glance down to check when what you need me to check, and we can all be done with this, the groundskeeper said. Absolutely not. I need to see for myself. If my poor grandson is wearing his ring in his deep sleep, then I'll know. I know this is one here in my hand is a fake and a fraud, and someone out there is trying to never mind, just please open it. Rebecca replied, Ma'am, perhaps he is right. Perhaps you should quickly turn away from the body, and I'll glance for you, Hem said at it. Both of you forget who you're talking to. I've seen worse things, although the idea of seeing him again is truly painful and something I'd wish we didn't have to do. I must do it. Now enough of this stalling. And so as I saw, open it quickly and let it be over, Rebecca ordered as the wind blew an icy breath over the slopes of the cemetery and chilled to their bones. The groundskeeper paused. He didn't want to do it. He was afraid of what was about to happen. Hampstead pulled himself out of the grave to keep to the groundskeeper more room. As he pushed himself up, the pressure from his feet cracked the lid of the coffin, and the groundskeeper fell through, clearly showing that there was nothing inside the coffin. What the devil? Hampstead shouted. Noticed the groundskeeper's feet went through the lid without hitting the body. Rebecca noticed too. She walked around the open grave, staring down with a furrowed brow as the frightening truth was setting in. No body. Open it, she said. Open the whole thing. Show me. Ma'am, I think we should just go. There's no sight for a lady, I assure you. Whatever is in here will stay on your mind all your life. No, you don't want to do it, the groundskeeper said as he removed his feet from the coffin. Damn it, I said, open it now, Rebecca screamed as the laugh loud as the wind. The groundskeeper looked at Rebecca, then at Hampstead, then Rebecca again. Then he finally did it. He opened the lid and revealed the truth. There was no body in the coffin. No Sebastian. No signet ring. Nothing. How? How could this be? The grave was, ma'am. I don't understand, Hampstead said as Rebecca looked down at the signet ring she found on Georgina's attack. Then it's true. This is and must. He must have killed, gasped, and taken Gia. Rebecca was unable to make her thoughts clear out loud, but in her mind it was clear as a tiny speck of blue sky peeking through the shadow. Gray cloud above their heads. Some way Sebastian was alive. Not dead, but alive. Ma'am, the groundskeeper began before being interrupted. I'll have not one more single word from you, Rebecca. This coffin, cover it and speak not a word of this to a single soul. I'll make your life a living hell, so hellish you'll wish it was you in that empty coffin. Do you understand? Not a word, Rebecca hissed. The groundskeeper's eyes darted, but he could see Rebecca was not playing. He took a deep breath and nodded his head yes. Hampstead, take me home now, Rebecca then ordered as she darted back into the car. Hampstead complied, and the two quickly made their way driving down the twisted road of St. Thomas Cemetery, leaving the groundskeeper to his own devices, still in Sebastian's grave and shivering in the bitter cold. In the car, Rebecca banged the inside of the car with her fist, screaming in absolute anger. She didn't understand how he could be alive, or how he could even be taken dead. But she knew in her heart that if he was taken in death, that there would have been no sign. Someone would have surely tried to ransom his body. Convenient charlatans and drunkens, thieves, someone would find an opportunity to peel an extra penny from the Lord family fortune. But there was no ransom for her grandson's body, not appeals for money, nothing. Gaspar's murder Georgina's attack, and abductions, Sebastian's signet ring, Rebecca thought. Could all this have been done by a living, breathing Sebastian? Hampstead watched his mistress in the rearview mirror. Her face, pale in anger, also showed pain and fear. She would find him. She needed to. She needed answers. She needed the darkness to end. Whomever was responsible, even if it was her own beloved grandson, wherever he was, whatever he was. All right, guys, that's my read along. Oh, gonna skip my review here in a second. Now, Christian's going to Wincliffe. He's going to be with Evie. Now, I gotta wonder if Sebastian's next, or not Sebastian, Nicholas is next. Uh, I'm starting to think like Philip now. I gotta worry about that son of a bitch's next move. But now I gotta wonder what Nicholas's next move is now, because now with Christian going away, he's got to find someone else. And I can't believe he fully trusts Philip quite yet. He's probably not convinced. At least I don't think he is, in my opinion. Like like Christian strain, but Philippe's just like to use an expression, because this is set during a different time. Literally, Philippe is juggling live grenades, and one's gonna drop. that's that's what it feels like. That dude's like, I gotta look after the vampire monster who bit me. I gotta keep his secret so no one else gets killed. My girlfriend slash lover is working up at the house where that son of a bitch lived. He was my friend. Christian's my friend. He's just something's gonna go off for that guy, and that ain't gonna probably be good. Um, I hope not. I mean, he's not a bad dude, but he's got a lot going on, and I'm sort of wondering, with not just with the body switch, but is 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 Mary going to attempt to kill Jacob in Georgina's body? I gotta sort of suspect that or question that, because I could see it happening. I could see it. But I'll also say this though too. I really love the scene setting. John really does put you there. It's easy to imagine this. He really makes it simple to imagine. Um, the characters are very interesting. Also, is Christian's mindset totally gone? It seems to be gone. Not going, gone. Um, really gone. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him and Wincliffe, and now with Evie getting shock treatment, what's going to happen there? So I gotta sort of wonder: is Jacob going to start questioning his mother, like, "Hey, where are you going here? Like you're just going off, disappearing on me," or is he too focused on Celeste? He might be. We'll see. So really, really good. Link to Benight and Beguile is going to be in the description box, guys. Go check this out. It's really, really good. See ya.